Hey everyone, my name is Eli, and I will be presenting for Group Three's project on affordable housing in Asheville, North Carolina. So, just as an introduction, we have a quote from one of the people we interviewed, Sage Turner, and she says, "Asheville is seen as a safe harbor from natural disasters as well as from COVID-19, showing how appealing this place is to live, and sort of giving a context for the demand for housing in this area." And for our project, we analyzed the history of affordable housing in Asheville, North Carolina, the current state of affordable housing, and we are proposing upzoning all the single family neighborhood zoned areas as a solution to the lack of affordable housing being constructed. So, some historical background 20 years ago, Asheville was not booming. The housing market was still pretty calm, and the city did not have a large tourism industry. Now, we no longer have an environment conducive to homeownership. This is once again another quote from Sage Turner. And we see in this history urban renewal projects that have commonly focused on maintaining residential areas while expanding parking availability and public arenas. So these projects often don't focus on the needs of the people actually living there, but once again are sort of catering to higher income people and tourists. And these projects drastically increase the tourist attraction. So neglecting the needs of the people who live there and the actual community. The current state of affordable housing is a pretty mixed bag. There's a pretty massive housing shortage with types of housing that are actually being constructed, not being affordable to the people who live there, especially the young people. We see rising housing costs, with the average home price increasing from $125,000 in 2000 to $235,000 in 2015, and this is an 88% increase. We see a low vacancy rate, which is on the positive end, but we still see that lack of multifamily housing being constructed. Half of Asheville citizens are cost burdened with spending at least 30% of their income on housing, and a third are what are called severely cost burdened, meaning they spend over half of their income on housing.
Housing in Nashville is expensive. As you can see, it's a lot higher than the national average and even higher than North Carolina average. Median sales price in Asheville is right at about $330,000. And what you get for the money can be different depending on a different part of the town, different neighborhood, different zip code. For example, if you look in South Asheville, you can find a home in 330,000 price range that would be new construction, 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, 16 or 1700 square feet with nice finishes, maybe on a quarter-acre lot. But if you move to a different part of town, for example, West Asheville, and I'm talking about the West Asheville, what you get for the money changes. The house will be smaller, maybe 1,000 or 1,100 square feet. It will be older, early or mid 1900s, because that's very typical for what the West Asheville area. 1 or 2 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, and even on a much smaller lot, because West Asheville is very popular. It's in high demand. Everyone wants to be there, so it's expensive to live there.
Um, and just to go back to that point, there's another quote from Sage Turner who says, "Individuals are forced out of the city due to cost and paying more for transportation to and from the city," sort of combining the rising cost of housing with the rising cost of transportation. And there's multiple contributing factors to the increased cost of housing, including the increase in short-term rentals. So, a circular housing market where people are moving in and out, and people aren't able to like put down roots. And yeah, a limited housing supply, increased tourism to the area, increased demand for housing. Once again, it's a very attractive place to live, so more and more people move in, especially people who are retirees or sometimes higher income people who come here for the attractions, for the natural environment, for the amenities. And there's a limited economic diversity. And another person that we interviewed, Andy Barnett from Asheville's Habitat for Humanity, sort of expanded on this. He said it's really just the share of the economy that is in low wage sector jobs. And he continues to explain how a lot of the people in Asheville work low wage, hospitality, service types of jobs, but the city has not expanded into sort of higher income positions, meaning that there's a real big disparity between the people who actually live there who are largely low income and the people who buy up a lot of the housing. Strategies currently employed. So just in the past 5 years, the city of Asheville has been investing in affordable housing bonds and is currently in the process of spending $25 million on affordable housing projects. Habitat for Humanity alone has worked on several dozen affordable housing projects, focusing primarily on these multifamily units. Pisgah Legal has received CARES Act funding this year of $200,000 for rental assistance. MHO tax credit projects funded by the North Carolina Housing and Finance Agency, and the Cassinger Group has begun constructing the first affordable housing development in Asheville, funded by both a public and private partnership. And focusing specifically on the homeless populations, the City of Asheville has launched the Homeless Initiative. And the initiative's main strategy is Housing Solves Homelessness, which can be broken up into two programs. So there's Permanent Supportive Housing, PSH, and Rapid Rehousing. And this just gives us sort of a layout of what the landscape in Asheville looks like. Notably, the gray area near the center is where most of the affordable housing is, and this is in downtown. And then the bright green zones are where the least affordable housing is, sort of further out in the outskirts. And you can see, if you look in the gray area, that like light blue zone up at the top sort of represents where there's locations that are zoned to allow for hotels. So once again, sort of showing that even in the very small amount of land that has a significant amount of low-income housing, still a lot of that land is being used to support the tourism industry and provide services for tourists and not necessarily the citizens who live there.
To further contextualize the lack of affordable housing in the Asheville community, we interviewed two experts on the topic, Sage Turner and Andy Barnett. Andy Barnett was named Executive Director of the Asheville Area Habitat for Humanity in 2016. Prior to obtaining this position, he served in the Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity for over 14 years and was consultant for a collaborative organization in St. Paul, Minnesota, focused on quality of life enrichment for its residents. As Executive Director for Asheville's Habitat Branch, Barnett has overseen dozens of affordable housing projects. Sage Turner was named chair of the City of Asheville Affordable Housing Committee in 2015 and began her involvement through community service and downtown revitalization projects. Turner is currently running for Asheville City Council with a platform filled with familiar policies, including support for a living wage and the upzoning of many of Asheville's neighborhoods. Both Barnett and Turner provided valuable insight into the affordable housing crisis in Asheville, bringing to the table their passion for the community and plethora of governance experience. Barnett noticed that the crux of the issue is mainly the mismatch of supply and demand in the housing market. With Asheville's population increasing at an impressive rate, housing units have not been added at a quick enough pace, causing prices to skyrocket and forcing lower income individuals to live outside of the city. Along a similar vein, Sage mentioned that the low vacancy rate, which is what percentage of houses on the market are available, paired with the high prices of housing, have led to 50% of Asheville's population to be cost burdened at 30%, meaning a third of their income is spent on rent alone.
That have been coming up with a solution of trying to create 1,000 units by 2025. This was a goal I had before I decided to run for office, but it's something that we have to do. And the plan that we have in place is actually 10 pages long. It's not something you can answer in 60 seconds. And that's why I spoke to it in the principles and the framework of how we would solve it. But every idea matters. Every idea that everyone brought up matters. Every idea has to happen. This is a multifaceted issue. It needs a multifaceted approach. It's been structural for decades. It needs structural approach to fix and correct the structure. There's a lot of work to be doing and a lot of work that needs to get done. And this community has not attracted the housing availability of dollars or tax credit programs like other communities do. There are key programs we're missing. We're missing philanthropic dollars. We're missing lending dollars and banking dollars from other, like Charlotte, where banking is a big deal. It's a banking community. Those banks have to invest in housing. We don't have that here. We're missing whole chunks of how the rest of the world tackles affordable housing. We have to get it right.
Based on background research and interviews with Andy and Sage, we proposed upzoning as a strategy for tackling the affordability crisis in Asheville. Upzoning to multifamily units would increase housing supply, lower overall housing costs, and integrate various communities that have been historically barred from moving into higher opportunity neighborhoods. This policy would affect low-density single-family housing, medium-density single-family housing, and high-density single-family housing within half a mile of all major corridors. From this map, you can see single-family zoned areas in green, including RS2, RS4, and RS8 houses on the peripheral of Asheville's city limits. In blue are the residentially zoned areas that allow for more than single-family housing. Keep in mind, this simplified map only shows residential areas and excludes business and industrial districts. Looking at this map, you can see that Asheville is no stranger to multifamily zoning. Upzoning would free up much of the land in green, making room for more affordable housing solutions. Specifically, upzoning would allow for lower income households in these zones to make full use of their property and would make more expensive neighborhoods that presently are zoned only for single-family housing more accessible. With every decision, there are obviously benefits and drawbacks. Some of the challenges associated with upzoning include political pushback from neighborhood groups like Not in My Backyard organizations. Additionally, rezoning may not immediately result in multifamily housing construction. Thus, further city incentives may be required for developer action. However, there are many benefits to upzoning. For one, it increases the housing supply and can remove barriers to higher opportunity neighborhoods. Moreover, upzoning paves the way for more affordable multifamily units to be constructed, as well as promotes residential development over unproductive land uses. In conclusion, we believe upzoning all single-family units to multifamily units within half a mile of all major corridors will be the most effective and feasible strategy for addressing the affordable housing crisis in Asheville. By no means do we recommend that this stratagem be employed on its own. Ideally, it would be implemented with a variety of other policy moves, such as monetary incentives to developers to build affordable housing and investment in opportunities for the city's lower income population. Thank you.